Hello, my name is Fraser Simons. This is my channel, Springboard Thought. Today I am in darkness as the third of 4 days, I think, snow falls here in Canada. So I am once again with my light on recording. And I haven't even read that much anyway. I have been commuting back and forth to my parents' house all week. And so I think I've only finished 4 books, and then I'm a good way into another book, which I'll talk about at the end here. The first book I read is Indian in the Cabinet, Speaking Truth to Power, Jody Wilson-Raybould. I gave this 4 stars. This is a memoir by Jody Wilson-Raybould, who's well known for basically resigning because of the SNC-Lavalin affair in Canada, which is probably pretty niche if you're not from Canada. It's like as much a scandal as Canada generally has in the government. Things are usually quite quiet. There's a lot of propaganda. This is sort of the biggest splash in recent memory for me. And essentially what happened was SNC-Lavalin colluded with people illegally, and they were being charged by the government or by the prosecutor, and the government, Trudeau's cabinet and government and him personally, wanted the people to exercise a judicial basically freedom that is available that would allow for SNC-Lavalin to make restitution in a different way than what the Attorney General wanted. They wanted to pursue like a sort of maximum penalty type deal. And the government wanted to commute it as a sort of ostensible favor to that company, which has a lot of jobs and does a lot of work here in Canada. They didn't want to lose them, so it was very murky and gross. And Raybould goes into all of this from the inception point of her sort of being courted by the Liberal Party to join them, all the way through her ministry days, sort of the granular things that she would fill her day with, and the work that she was doing, what she's passionate about, how she's passionate about doing it, what leadership means to her, all that kind of stuff, leading right through the affair to more or less what she is doing now. It is, I thought, quite good. It's very conversational, but it's conversational in a way that an academic would make the book conversational. So what I mean by that is it is written almost in the structure of technical writing, which you can tell she's probably written a lot of as Attorney General, former Attorney General, and Minister of Justice. So I would say it's good technical writing that only sort of a little bit cross purposes at the intersection of the memoir type that she's going for. So it occupies a strange liminal space for me. But it was fine. I just found it a little bit granular. Actually a lot granular. She goes into very hyper specifics about a lot of things that I didn't really care about. And I think a part of this, at least maybe a quarter or halfway through, she sort of defines what she is trying to accomplish with the book, which again is a little bit odd. You would probably like preface that or initially suppose it so that people kind of understand what's going on with the structure, how much detail there's going to be, what details are going to be in there. So it's just a little bit messy in that sense. She narrates it fairly well, surprisingly. And it was all around interesting for me because I have an interest in that topic. I don't know how much widespread appeal there is going to be for it, but if you're at all interested in her, she's an Indigenous woman. She's a very sort of high caliber politician now that has always been in politics because her father is quite famous and she's followed in those footsteps. She leads using Indigenous methods, which is quite different to Western politics and why she sort of constantly ground up against the Liberal Party, which is very concerned with maintaining power and making gestures at change while not actually doing it. So I thought it was fascinating. I thought she was fantastic. She's a really interesting person that I will definitely support in the future. And I recommend it if you're into that. Just know that it's sort of, you know, kind of readable, but not. It's like technical writing, but not. Next, I read Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell. This I gave 4 stars. It was close to getting 5 stars for me. I probably don't have to go into this because it's quite well tread ground on here on BookTube. I thought the voice was excellently crafted. It was eminently readable. The person narrating the audiobook was incredibly good at it. And I was just completely riveted. That said, I don't know anything about Shakespeare, really. Like, all that I was taught in high school is probably out the door for me already. I know that he had a son at a broad stroke level, and I know that this book takes the specific things that he injected in his work as sort of chapter or inspirational basis to extrapolate that life. And so I think that's an interesting concept. I don't know how retread that ground is at all, because I just am not super interested in Shakespeare. High school sort of slayed that for me. In high school class, I was one of the few that seemed to be able to parse what was happening in the way that they were structured when they were written. So my teacher would constantly call on me to read out the paragraph and then explain what I thought it meant. And so, and I'm like a very introverted, shy person, so that was sort of like hell on earth for me. And that was like Romeo and Juliet and Hamlet, and I think one other book, something like that. So by the end of it, I just didn't want to deal with Shakespeare at all. This book, I quite enjoyed. I thought it fumbled a little bit with the ending, but it has some really fantastic plot beats. Agnes is an incredible character and really propelled all of the story, making everybody else feel quite minor in comparison, especially for a book named Hamnet. But yeah, I found it fascinating. So maybe if you don't know too much about this, and also you like her writing in general, you might also like it. Next, I read Rules of Civility by Amor, Towles. I think that's how you pronounce it. I give this 5 stars, and it was a very pleasant surprise to me, as you can generally tell. My 5s are usually, it surprised me. But it's surprising because I read Gentlemen of Moscow in Moscow, and I thought that was just fine. It worked okay for me, but there wasn't anything particularly about the voice that drew me in. It was hard to relate to an aristocrat who was like on hard fallen days as somebody who grew up in poverty. It was just a fine book, basically, whereas this is like incredibly my jam. This is a woman looking at her past in a very specific year, as a lot of sort of coming of age things tend to be framed that way these days. It's a specific year where it's sort of like, I guess, made her character, tested her character, the most pivotal events to her life happened. The voice is exquisite. I could listen to this character talk about absolutely anything. The narration for the audiobook was perfect. And the story, while sort of meandering in plot, yeah, I'd say so, didn't really matter to me because whatever she was doing, she was articulating it in an interesting way to me. There's a lot of like book knowledge being dropped. Her relationship to books, presumably why she's writing one right now. Love life, scandal. It's about a young woman who sort of transgresses and makes friends with people of higher class, and then that juxtaposition is most of the drama that ensues throughout her life. And her friend initially takes like a very big predominant hold on the plot and the characterization of her, but unusually for a type of book like this, that sort of falls away. They kind of go into cross purposes, and then you expect them to come back together at some point in some ways, but it doesn't quite happen like that. And so that was like a unusual, fun surprise for me, where I just kept expecting it to be a different coming of age story, and it sort of withheld that catharsis, and I liked it for that. It's very big on description as well, which is sort of my jam. I like specificity, especially on that, and scene setting. There's a lot of fun diction and slang for the times. I think this is set in the 1937s. A thing that I don't really know about New York City is, as you might imagine, a character, sort of a quintessential, I guess, thing for people to say about a novel, but in this case, I think it is. It's about nostalgia, the act of remembering something actively and for a specific purpose. It usually falls into a place with these where I don't like that they have this like almost perfect recall of these events, but enough happens in the year that it feels somewhat convincing that she can extrapolate this narrative around that specific year and no other. Like, it's not a sweeping thing where she remembers like her whole life, an eidetic memory or something like that. It's just one year with a lot of memorable things happening. So it's just sort of a confluence of things that I quite enjoy, and I sort of get why this author is so popular these days. And I might even give him another try, but probably not that latest one, because I've been hearing very mixed things about it. And then the last one, again, is an audiobook, History of My Brief Body by Billy Ray Belcourt. This got 4 stars, so I've been having a good week, even though it's been a small week for me. This is by the poet who's quite famous in Canada. It's generally a memoir slash sometimes poetic piece that goes into sort of essayist formats, as far as I can tell, on the narration. I'd have to look at the book to see how it's formatted, because I suspect it's a little bit different, because he's a poet. But it's essentially just traces more or less linearly what it was like to grow up as a gay man who's Indigenous in Canada, who's kind of like always being assailed by our culture, by our people, but also the gay angle with him being like assailed by people fetishizing him greatly on things like Grindr and other dating apps like that, and his sort of problematic ways of dealing with it, while also trying to, like, in the structure, be decolonizing somewhat of all of these aspects. And part of the way he does that is to call upon different authors and what they have done in the space as well, and then sort of like give them props, give him his own thoughts on each of these subjects, but also give you references so that if you wanted to like go in deeper on these things, then it would be worthwhile. And some of the books I had already read already, so it was nice to get his thoughts in tandem with my own. Generally very thoughtful, very provoking and interesting. It's always generally from a decolonial mindset, I would say, more or less. And yeah, so it's not an upbeat book, but I did find it compelling. I did see some other reviews where they said that he has kind of like a problematic encounter with another gay man, but I don't know. I thought that it was very clear that he was sort of articulating that he was being problematic in that moment, as well as having something very like frightening happen to him. So I don't know, it might be something that could be polarizing, but I think every other aspect or like chapter in the book where it's trying to hone in on a very specific subject while tracing his life was well handled as far as I could tell. I mean, I'm a white cis author, so, you know, take that with a grain of salt, and obviously read around different reviews and opinions and see if it will be for you. But I thought it was very worthwhile. And again, this is another case of the author narrating it quite well, which again is always a surprise for me. Next, I am 77% done. Anathem by Neil Stephenson, who's an author that I generally don't like. This book has been interesting so far, though. I mean, I'm at 77% into this 970-page book. So it is keeping me going. I don't think it's justified its length so far whatsoever. It is doing that thing where the characters are quite young, and so it ventures into like YA diction and characterization and stuff like that, while trying to maintain like an adult fiction status or genre fiction status, which isn't quite working for me. Like, none of the characters are quite compelling. The relationship subplot is laughably bad, I would say, but the plot overall is interesting. This takes place in the future, where more or less these monastic monks are in different fields of science and thought and philosophy in general, with the A plot being that they find or think they find a UFO, basically an object that they can't define in the sky as it is related to them. And it's a group of them sort of in secret trying to figure out what the heck is going on, and then it sort of spirals off from there. And more, I think, would be spoilers, but it goes into like, is this an alien or not? How are we going to evaluate this? What are the different schools of thought when thinking of something foreign in relation to us? So there's a lot more philosophy than I expected. This is always shelved as cyberpunk, which is odd for me and why I picked it up. I have like a, I don't know, small or low-key goal of reading cyberpunk books throughout my life, that I kind of want to read like all of them, but not all of them, because some of them are terrible, but a lot of them anyway. And so far I'm not really seeing why this is cyberpunk, and so I'll probably go into that in my review in the future. But so far this is going to be a 3-star read, if it lands the ending. I'm also reading Tana French, The Likeness, because I loved In the Woods, and I'm about halfway through this or so. I'm also really liking this. I think she's a great writer. This is an interesting concept once again. It's got Cassie as the main character instead of Rob, the douche, for In the Woods, and I'm liking it quite a bit. I think this will be another maybe standalone review, which In the Woods will be as well. So picked up Michael Kohlhaas from the library. I saw this on, oh shoot, what's her name? Anna something, who walks around New York City and getting books and stuff like that. This was on her recommending Christmas books to family members thing, and it's like John Wick in medieval times, and I was like, yes please, basically, and also the cover. And I also got this in the mail to review soon, 36 Streets by T.R. Napper. I really liked his collection of short stories, which this world is set in as well, like same universe. This is cyberpunk again, set in Australia. It's very inclusive. He's very aware of the genre. I think he did a English degree that had something to do with cyberpunk as a thesis, from what I recall. And his short story collection, Neon to Leviathan, was great. I gave it 4 stars, and I am very excited to read this arc and get that out. And then lastly, just a small update as an author. I thought it'd be cool to show you my game Retropunk translated into Portuguese. And it's funny because the studio that did it is called Retropunk. So it's Retropunk produced by Retropunk, which is funny. And this is a cyberpunk game that I designed last year, I believe. and it's quite traditional in its play, but also minimalist, and so it assumes a lot from the players in some ways, being aware of RPGs and play culture in general. Anytime you see a minimalist game, it just generally means that we assume you know what an RPG is or a tabletop role-playing game is, and that you're sort of familiar with how to play this type of game with other people. And so I'm going to give you as little information as possible for you to play the game, and you can subjectively fill in the gaps to your own play culture, play style with your friends, etc. So that's really cool. I got 3 of these in the mail. Anyway, that's my week, and I will see you next video. Bye.